gosh. I just need to take a moment and take this in. Soak it in. I am soaking it in. I'm soaking it all in. All right, well now to my speech. I promise I won't go off script. Nothing good ever happens when I do that. So first and foremost, welcome to the inaugural Arts Track at the Yale Innovation Summit. My name is Frances Pollock, and I'm the CEO of Midnight Oil Collective. I am overjoyed to welcome you to the Yale School of Management for what promises to be a momentous 2 days full of conversation, demonstration, and contemplation about the state of arts and culture today. Now, I will be the first to tell you that I hate interactive theater, but if you wouldn't mind indulging me for just one moment, raise your hand if you are sitting in this audience and identify as an artist. Give yourselves a hand, artists. You are our VIPs for the next 2 weeks. Welcome. Now, one more thing. Raise your hand again, all you artists who just put your hands up, raise your hand again if you ever thought you would find yourself attending a corporate innovation summit conference at a business school. Right. Yeah, no, this is not a place where we artists tend to hang out. In fact, arts and business are known to separate like oil and water. So this, of course, raises the question, what on earth are a bunch of artists doing at an innovation summit at an Ivy League business school? Look, historically, Yale Innovation Summit has been a gathering place primarily for investors and founders who work in the field of biotech. That means last year, if you were lucky enough, like me, to attend this fabulous conference, you were surrounded by people who were almost exclusively talking about therapeutics and cutting-edge technologies. You see, this conference makes sense for those kinds of people, the scientists and the techies. Tech and biology and other STEM-related disciplines have a culture of innovation baked into their ecosystem. And when I say a culture of innovation, what I mean is that there is a strong precedent for people working in the fields of STEM and technology to have access to structures that will help them figure out the research side of their work along with the business, legal, and financial resources to help their work find its place to the market. This is what business types call finding a product market fit. And frankly, it's a brilliant model. Investors, venture capitalists, and top legal firms know to seek out events like the Yale Innovation Summit because they know that the best and brightest new companies will be pitching themselves at a place like this. So just so you know, our brothers and our sisters and other tracks are all out there hustling, trying to find people to support the next steps in their work so that they can drive their own intellectual property forward. You know who doesn't have this type of culture? Artists. Can you imagine if the status quo of our industry was that there were investors out there looking to cut us big checks for us to scale and build our work? Or if there were business and legal types who wanted to collaborate about scrappy and innovative ways of structuring our work, bringing on funding, and getting our work out there. But that's not the world right now that we live in. Our pathways to productions and distributions are outdated and inequitable. And it's actually an enormous problem. Look, nobody knows better than us artists that when it comes to the business, legal, and financial side of producing our own work, we get the short end of the stick. It is this dismal reality, in fact, that has led our colleagues from the WGA to shut down film and TV production across major networks. Right now, they are striking because old models of paying writers are not compatible with the streaming services used to distribute their work. With the rise of the cost of living in major metropolitan centers and the stagnation and decline in pay, there's no such thing as a middle-class writer these days. Since the pandemic, performers have been leaving the industry in troves because of economic realities of our field. I actually heard this story the other day that just broke my heart. I was talking to an actor, and she was talking about a movie that she had made that went on to make $300 million at the box office. Her face was the face on every poster, on every billboard, on every bus that was used to promote the film. And that actor was paid $2,500. Her residuals are capped at $1,100 quarterly. Without her, That movie would not have been possible, and yet she will see virtually none of the upside of her work. To be an artist today almost necessitates having an outside support to provide a safety net when current status quo of our connected industries lets us down economically. Needing to have a safety net as an artist in a field that leads to a field that is predominantly white, predominantly wealthy, and predominantly industry connected. Those are the artists who are able to dictate our culture today, the artists that can afford to stick around. And it's easy for us artists who are struggling to point our fingers at the studios and the regional theaters and the galleries and say, it's your fault we're starving. And while I'm certainly not denying that they're not part of the problem, they're going through their own economic crisis. In the nonprofit sector, things are a mess. With the rise of the cost of living in major metropolitan areas, donor patterns have changed. 501c3s can no longer rely on the subscriber model. Things have gotten so dire that for the first time in history, the Metropolitan Opera withdrew $30 million for its endowment to support its current season. This radically changes their business model. Regional theaters across the country are slashing budgets, cutting programming, and giving up their spaces just to survive. And even with all of this triage, nonprofits in the creative ecosystem, big and small, are closing at an alarming rate. And in the commercial sector, things aren't necessarily much better. Broadway productions have become so prohibitively expensive that current residencies are almost exclusively remounts and adaptations, simply because it is perceived as far too risky to invest in anything new. This trend is carried into film and TV as well, where we've reached the age of the mega studio franchise, where studios are repackaging content that is 20, 30, and 40 years old and trying to sell it to us like it's a fresh new idea. The reason that they're doing this is because content made and owned exclusively by studios is incredibly expensive to make. Studios need a guarantee that they're going to make a return on their investment, so they repackage ideas that have already sold once and are likely to sell again. But here's the thing. Art influences culture, and culture dictates policy. If you repeatedly sell audiences repackaged art that is 20, 30, and 40 years old, you can be guaranteed that culturally we will be stuck in ideas and policy that are 20 and 30 and 40 years old. In a world where the average adult consumes 11 hours of content and media a day, the reality is that the plight of the starving artist affects us all. And together we need to face the fact that we're at an inflection point, one that will necessitate us re-examining and reimagining our systems of cultural production. Now, I have this radical notion that most of the problems facing the starving artists today can be solved by artists themselves, so long as we have the right scaffolding. Hang with me, artists. We have a lot more power here than we think. After all, the industry is nothing without us. We are the dreamers who have always captured and examined humanity at its best and worst, turning our visions into plays and paintings and songs that have won or could win the hearts of millions of people globally. It's this intellectual property, these dreams and paintings and stories that we come up with, they go on to generate hundreds of billions of dollars annually when they connect with their audience. And it all starts with the audience, with the artist. After all, what would the $1.5 billion Hamilton franchise be without Lin-Manuel Miranda? What would the $1.6 billion How to Train Your Dragon franchise be without Cressida Cowell? What would the $51.8 billion Star Wars franchise be without George Lucas? In fact, the next major franchise could be sitting on a hard drive of someone in this very room right now. There is no doubt that creative assets can generate significant economic impact, but it's rarely the artist who is in control of how their artistic work is built and scaled, or who benefits from its return. Right now, theater writers who are produced on Broadway have royalties as low as 2 to 3%, with the lion's share of the profit going to intermediaries and investors. An industry standard in Hollywood necessitate writers to sell their intellectual property outright at its earliest stages. Can you imagine if tech founders were treated this way? If we expected Mark Zuckerberg, for example, to sell his business plan of Facebook outright before any real development had occurred. If tech worked like the arts, then Zuck would have felt that his only path forward would be to sell the business plan and the early IP to Facebook for a couple $100,000 to an established company. That company would decide how the IP was developed or if it would be developed at all. Meanwhile, Mark would be on to his next idea. And if he continuously had to generate and try and sell potentially billion-dollar unicorn visions and IPs to someone else, he would be as disenfranchised as every working artist in America today. That's the plight of today's starving artist. But to return to our initial question, what are a bunch of artists doing at an innovation summit? This is what we are here to discuss. In the innovation space, we recognize that creators are entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs are creators. At this conference, we are going to entertain this radical notion that today's artists can be visionaries who drive their work forward throughout its production life cycle. We are going to imagine that today's artists aren't automatically allergic to business and finance, and that by empowering today's artists to remain in control of their work, they ultimately will create disruptive, more efficient, more equitable, more sustainable models with which to scale their work. We're going to consider what it looks like if there were investment opportunities tailored for today's artist entrepreneur, and consider what kind of returns, both financial and social, we could expect to see from artist-led franchises and ventures. And on top of talking about why it is time to reimagine the creative economy, we are going to talk about why this is the place. As you will see, most of the events over the next 2 days feature a combination of national arts leadership and local New Haven arts leadership. This is entirely intentional. As New Haven is perfectly primed to be the leader in this new landscape. New Haven, with its dynamic Dixwell jazz scene and its reputation for being Broadway's out-of-town tryout, has long been a place where artists could dream and iterate on creative ideas in front of eager audiences. To nobody's surprise, in the past year, the New York Times has twice highlighted New Haven as a sanctuary for artists of all kinds, even going so far as to name it one of 52 places in the world to visit because of its art scene. In the midst of this dynamic and powerful city sits Yale University, which boasts top art schools in music, art, and drama, drawing incredible talent from across the world. It is this very connection to the arts that has led Yale to being named the Ivy of the Humanities. Not Harvard, not MIT, not Stanford, but Yale. With a city bursting with creative energy and foundational support and a world-class university that excels at the arts, imagine what we could build here. All it will take is investment, cooperation, and collaboration between local and global artists, between different facets of the university, and the many artistic institutions of this city. One final note. Throughout the summit, you will see this symbol again and again. This one. This is the logo for the Midnight Oil Collective, a company built by artists that is dedicated to reimagining these systems of cultural production. When you see an artist wearing the MOC logo, talk to them. Ask them about the ways they would like to see the industry evolve. After all, no one is more perfectly situated to imagine creative ways to build the world that we all want to be a part of. And together, let's talk about how to get these artists the support they need in order to do their best work. It is our firm belief at Midnight Oil Collective that liberated creators will turn around and return the favor by helping to liberate creation, and that together we will all be better for it. In a moment, I'm going to hand the stage over to MOC Board Chair John Kao, who is going to, in return, introduce Jeff Brock. Jeff is the Dean of the Yale School of Engineering and Applied Science. And as a Yale leader, Jeff exemplifies the type of interdisciplinary connection to the arts, humanities, and innovation. On top of being a world-class mathematician, Jeff is also an incredible jazz bassist who is known for his work with B.J. Iyer and others. We invited Jeff to perform on this keynote because he embodies the intersectional leadership that Yale is primed to foster throughout this community. In fact, as he speaks, he's actually running over from introducing the tech track just across the hall. So without further ado, John, I'm eager to hand this over to you, but I just want to conclude with an enormous welcome, an enormous amount of gratitude, and an enormous amount of excitement for this opening to the inaugural Arts Track at the Yale Innovation Summit. I hope your next 2 days are full of creativity and inspiration starting right now.